They didn't mean to call humans. The distress signal was a desperate pulse flung into ancient, half-forgotten frequencies, old tech from a war that should have never reached their quiet part of the galaxy. The Oryx High Council had no illusions. It was a dying gasp, meant more as a funeral cry than a request for help. The enemies at their doorstep were merciless. Their allies, silent. Their hope, already buried beneath the wreckage of their orbiting defense rings. What they didn't know, what no one in that region of space knew, was that those ancient channels hadn't been dead. They had been monitored by Earth. And Earth never forgot what those channels meant, sealed under layers of AI protocols. Hidden from the politics of the galactic concord, Earth's early warning systems flickered to life for the first time in centuries. The signal matched a distress category labeled Priority Black, hostile extermination. Within hours, a fleet was moving. It wasn't just military, it was a legacy. A force built for one thing, to make sure no genocide went unanswered. The Oryx had begged the stars for mercy. They didn't get mercy. They got humanity. The Oryx were a proud and old civilization. Nestled on the far rim of the western spiral arm, they had cultivated peace, culture, and science for over 10,000 years. Their society thrived on harmony and precision, avoiding war by aligning themselves with the ancient alliances of their sector. They were scholars and stargazers, not soldiers. The Oryx were a proud and old civilization. Nestled on the far rim of the western spiral arm, they had cultivated peace, culture, and science for over 10,000 years. Their society thrived on harmony and precision, avoiding war by aligning themselves with the ancient alliances of their sector. They were scholars and stargazers, not soldiers. Which is why when the Rylok Dominion breached the Oryx boundary, there was no real defense. The Rylok had no interest in negotiation or tribute. They were after subjugation, planetary bombardment, genetic harvesting. The war wasn't declared. It simply began like a sudden storm breaking a serene sky. One after another, Oryx colonies were snuffed out. Their once majestic orbital cities burned, and their crystalline towers crashed into oceans. In desperation, the Oryx sent a distress call. Not through modern quantum relays. Those had been jammed. Instead, their engineers turned to the old systems. Relic subquantum bands that predated the galactic concord. Nobody used them anymore. Except, someone was still listening. Buried under the Mariana Trench, inside a structure officially labeled a geological research station, Earth's defense, AI caught the signal. It wasn't a normal message. It was a panic scream, layered with biometric data of mass extinction, orbital scans of invasion fleets, and rapid genetic collapse markers. Protocol extinction contingency, external activated. The last time it had been triggered, Earth was barely recovering from the solar border conflicts, but this was different. The signal had come through a frequency that Earth had encoded itself during its expansionist era. Frequencies designed to be picked up by early warning satellites meant for deep space diplomacy or rapid response military action. Humanity had changed since then. The Earth now was a reluctant superpower, technologically advanced, militarily dominant, and politically withdrawn. The Solar Alliance, which governed Earth and her colonies, had adopted a policy of non-intervention beyond the Orion Arm, but this wasn't intervention. This was a call for help on old Earth channels, and humanity responded. The first fleet launched from Titan, Admiral Rhea Langston, commander of the Sol Defense Armada, received the directive with a single sentence: protect the innocent, deploy immediate response. That was all she needed. Within minutes, slipspace drives engaged across 17 dreadnoughts, 32 cruisers, and an escort of 200 support vessels. Human fleets weren't subtle. They didn't sneak into orbit or mask their presence. They arrived like the fist of an angry god, slipping through gravitational walls with thunderclaps of folded spacetime. The Rylok noticed. On the edge of the Oryx homeworld, Rylok destroyers were executing the final stage of orbital collapse. The Oryx fleet, mostly civilian-modified cargo ships, was vaporized in the first wave. The last orbital defense, cannon ran out of charge, and then the stars tore open. The human dreadnought Sol's Vengeance emerged first, its hull glowing from slipspace radiation. Plasma batteries deployed, missile pods bloomed open, shield matrices flared. Within seconds, 12 Rylock warships were reduced to drifting slag. The rest turned to engage, but the tide had already turned. To the Oryx, it was a miracle. They watched, stunned, as blue shining ships with Earth flags decimated the enemy. Humans didn't ask permission. They didn't negotiate terms. They established a defensive perimeter, stabilized orbital control, and began evacuation of surviving Oryx civilians. Medical drones, heavy gravity lifters, and mobile defense platforms deployed simultaneously. It was warfare, engineered like a rescue operation. Admiral Langston addressed the Oryx High Council via hologram. "We received your signal. You're not alone. Stand by while we neutralize the threat." The Rylock didn't retreat. They weren't used to resistance, but they weren't ready for Earth. Phase 2 of the human fleet arrived. Carrier groups loaded with rapid response AI combat units, biomechanical infantry, and atmospheric suppressors. Within 48 hours, the Rylock advance halted. Within 72, it collapsed entirely. The Rylock home fleet attempted retaliation. They were met at the edge of the Helian corridor by the Second Human Armada. This wasn't the first time humans had been underestimated. During the Great Orion Push, centuries earlier, human colonies had fought alone against extinction, building technologies not for conquest, but for survival. Shield lattices, kinetic nullifiers, entropy bombs, and rapid burn FTL systems had all been born from desperation. And that legacy never left their arsenals. The Rylock learned this too late. Their pride had expected easy conquest. What they encountered was a force that had stared into the abyss of annihilation and built weapons to punch back. Humanity didn't conquer, but they ended wars. In the aftermath, the Oryx invited Earth to formal alliance talks. They offered art, knowledge, star maps, and even diplomatic titles. Earth declined most of it. The only request Admiral Langston made, access to the old subquantum distress bands, restored, so others could call for help the same way. The Oryx rebuilt. Earth provided infrastructure and defense training, but never established bases. They came, they defended, they left, but the story spread. Across the stars, civilizations whispered, "If you're in danger and no one else answers, use the old bands." Because Earth listens. And when they come, they don't come with words. They come with a fleet. The Rylock High Command met in emergency session beneath their homeworld's icy mantle. They were not used to fear. The Dominion had expanded for centuries, consuming weaker civilizations and exploiting genetic material for war breeding. Their confidence had been unshakable, until now. Intelligence officers played back footage of human boarding parties, not just soldiers, but walking tanks. Humans wrapped in exo-rigs that deflected plasma bolts and crushed steel walls. AI combat swarms that moved with terrifying coordination. EMP pulses that deactivated Rylock cybernetics mid-battle. "They use war as a tool of mercy," growled War Marshal Ulkan, slamming a clawed fist into the obsidian table. "That makes them unpredictable." Their scientists had tried to study the debris from destroyed Earth ships, but most components self-immolated or fused at the atomic level. A few fragments revealed materials that shifted structure under observation. Programmable. Matter unknown to Rylock science. But the real terror came from their psychology briefings. Humans, according to analysis, had evolved not as apex predators, but as cooperative survivors. They bonded, they empathized, and when they committed to protection, they did so absolutely. Their greatest strength wasn't their technology, it was their moral fury. The Rylock had miscalculated. Again. Debate raged. Retreat? Sue for peace? Redirect to another galaxy arm? But every plan ended in one truth. Earth now knew they existed. And Earth never forgot threats. The Dominion would never be the same again. In the decades following the incident, the story of the Oryx rescue became legend, not just among the Oryx, but throughout the Spiral Arms. It wasn't just that Earth, had answered a call. It was how they had answered. The term human armada became shorthand for unstoppable intervention, righteous, terrifying, precise. Admiral Langston retired with honors, but her legacy didn't fade. In her final address to the Solar Alliance Council, she said, "We came because it was right. We left because it was enough." But the galaxy didn't forget. Treaties were redrawn. Pirate factions disbanded overnight. 2 empires postponed their war indefinitely, citing unpredictable third-party intervention. Even the Krivian Syndicate, which had never acknowledged Earth's power, began secret talks to establish neutral trade relations. A new protocol was introduced in galactic diplomacy, Echo 9, also known as the Earth Clause. If any distress signal was picked up on human legacy bands, it would be treated as a sector-wide emergency because no one wanted to face the Armadan prepared, and so the humans watched from afar, silent guardians, because they didn't mean to call Earth that day, but Earth answered anyway. Legacy of the Shield, Admiral Langston's last directive. Admiral Rhea Langston didn't return to Earth a hero. Heroes wore medals and basked in parades. Langston Rao.